The Diddy scandal just took a turn that most of Hollywood was praying would never happen. If you thought the raid on his Miami mansion was just for show, or that the 1,000 bottles of baby oil was just a meme, you are missing the single darkest piece of evidence the feds just put on the table. As of right now, Sean Diddy Combs has been denied bail not once, but twice, and remains in federal custody. But the reason the judge is keeping him locked up isn't just about what he did in the past. It's about what he was trying to do right now from behind the scenes. We are going to answer the 3 questions that the mainstream media is too scared to touch. First, what exactly did the feds find in those freak-off kits that goes way beyond baby oil? Second, why is the specific charge of racketeering conspiracy a virtual life sentence that almost no one beats? And third, and most importantly, who else is on the tapes that the Department of Homeland Security now has in their possession? Most people think this is just another celebrity cancellation. They are wrong. This is a federal RICO case, the same legal weapon used to take down the mafia and R. Kelly. By the end of this video, you will understand why the freak-offs weren't just parties. They were, according to the government, a criminal business operation. But first, we have to go back to the moment the illusion shattered. On March 25, 2024, the world watched as armored vehicles and federal agents swarmed Diddy's Holmby Hills estate in Los Angeles and his Star Island mansion in Miami. At the time, Diddy's team called it a witch hunt and a gross overuse of military-level force. But when the indictment was finally unsealed on September 17th, we learned exactly why the feds went in so hard. They weren't just looking for drugs, they were looking for the infrastructure of the freak-offs. According to the 14-page indictment released by the Southern District of New York, agents seized narcotics, 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, and yes, over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. But let's look closer at that number. 1,000 bottles. That isn't for personal use. That is inventory. That is logistics. The indictment alleges that Diddy and his staff treated these freak-offs like elaborate theatrical productions. And this is where it gets dark. The government alleges that these weren't just parties. They were coerced sexual performances that could last for days. The script of the indictment literally describes how Diddy and his staff would arrange for the travel of commercial sex workers, transport them across state lines, which is a federal crime, and then stockpile supplies to keep the performance going. The detail that made everyone in the courtroom gasp wasn't the sex, it was the recovery. The indictment states that the participants were often so exhausted and drugged that they required IV fluids to recover. Think about the level of control required to have IV bags on standby. That isn't a party. That is a medical crisis being managed by a payroll department. The feds claim that Diddy didn't just participate, he directed. He allegedly filmed these encounters from multiple angles. And this brings us to the most dangerous aspect of the case for the rest of the entertainment industry, the tapes. When agents raided those homes, they didn't just take the oil. They took the hard drives, they took the phones, they took the cloud backups. If the government's timeline is correct, these recordings go back over a decade. The indictment mentions that Diddy used these sensitive recordings as collateral, a way to ensure silence. If a victim tried to leave or speak out, the threat of the tape leaking was the leash that pulled them back. But now, those tapes are in the hands of the U.S. Attorney's Office. This explains the deafening silence from Hollywood. No one knows what or who is on those hard drives. Now let's talk about the charge itself, because this is the mechanism that locks the cell door. Diddy hasn't just been charged with sex trafficking. He has been charged with racketeering conspiracy. This is the RICO statute. To prove RICO, the government doesn't just have to prove a crime happened. They have to prove that Diddy ran a criminal enterprise. The indictment explicitly names Combs Global and Bad Boy Entertainment as the shells used to facilitate these crimes. This is critical because it drags his entire business empire into the mud. The feds are arguing that his security teams, his assistants, and his travel agents were all part of the Combs enterprise. They allegedly booked the flights, stocked the rooms, and cleaned up the damage. In the eyes of the law, if you booked the flight for a freak-off knowing what was going to happen, you aren't an assistant, you are a co-conspirator. This is why Diddy was denied bail. His legal team offered a massive package, $50 million, secured by his Miami mansion and his mother's home. They offered GPS monitoring. They offered to sell his private plane. They offered to limit his visitors to family only. The judge said no. Why? Because of witness tampering. Prosecutors argued that Diddy has a long history of obstruction of justice. They cited text messages and calls where he allegedly tried to pressure witnesses to change their stories. They mentioned that he had contacted Kalina Harper, a former Dirty Money Group member, after the lawsuit from Cassie Ventura dropped. The judge looked at the evidence and decided that no amount of money could guarantee that Diddy wouldn't try to silence his accusers again. Let's pause on the Cassie Ventura timeline, because she is the domino that knocked this entire tower over. For years, rumors about Diddy were just that, rumors. Then in November 2023, Cassie filed a bombshell civil lawsuit. She alleged years of abuse, rape, and sex trafficking. She detailed the freak-offs in graphic detail. She claimed Diddy blew up Kid Cudi's car. She claimed he dangled her over a balcony. Diddy settled that lawsuit in one day. One day. His team claimed the settlement was just to make the problem go away and was not an admission of guilt. But the damage was done. The details in Cassie's lawsuit gave the feds the roadmap they needed to prove her story. They didn't need Cassie to testify if they could find the physical evidence that corroborated her story. And that is exactly what they found in the March raids. The receipts matched the story. Cassie said there were guns. They found guns. Cassie said there were drugs. They found drugs. Cassie said there were freak-off supplies. They found 1,000 bottles. This brings us to the reality of the situation today. We have to look at the pattern of silence. You have to ask yourself, where are his friends? Where are the people who drank his Ciroc and partied on his yachts for the last 20 years? They are gone. They have ghosted him. This isn't just because he's toxic. It is because of the RICO implication. If the Combs enterprise is a criminal organization, anyone who benefited from it or facilitated it is a potential in the crosshairs. There is a legal concept called willful blindness. You cannot simply say, I didn't know, if the evidence of the crime was happening right in front of you. If you were at a freak-off and you saw the coerced workers and you saw the drugs and you stayed, you are a witness. And the feds love flipping witnesses. The strategy of the Southern District of New York is famous. They don't miss. They have a conviction rate of over 95%. They wait until the case is watertight before they make an arrest. The fact that they moved on Diddy means they are confident they have him dead to rights. So, what happens next? Diddy is currently sitting in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. This is a notorious facility. It is the same place where R. Kelly is held. It is the same place where Ghislaine Maxwell was held. It is known for being rough, understaffed, and dangerous. For a man who has lived in absolute luxury for 30 years, this is a shock to the system that cannot be overstated. His lawyers are appealing the bail decision, but the odds are slim. The flight risk argument is strong. He has a private plane and billions of dollars, but the danger to the community argument is stronger. The prosecutors have painted a picture of a man who uses fear and violence to get what he wants, and the judge agrees. We also have to talk about the financial fallout. Diddy has stepped down as chairman of Revolt. His charter schools have cut ties. His liquor deals are effectively dead. The Diddy brand, which was worth close to $1 billion, has evaporated overnight. But the money is the least of his problems. The racketeering conspiracy charge carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. The sex trafficking by force charge carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years. If he is convicted on just these 2 counts, he will likely die in federal prison. This is the expectation versus reality check that Hollywood needs. The expectation was that Diddy was too big to fail,
that he had too much money, too many connections, and too much dirt on everyone else to ever go down. The reality is that the federal government does not care about your connections when they have you on tape. The reality is that the freak-offs were not a lifestyle, they were a liability. And that liability has finally come due. As we wait for the trial, watch the headlines for proffer agreements. This is when a co-conspirator agrees to tell the government everything they know in exchange for a lighter sentence. Diddy's inner circle is tight, but facing 20 years in prison has a way of loosening tongues. The 1,000 bottles were just the physical evidence. The testimonial evidence is coming next, and it will be devastating. If you think you know the whole story, you don't. We are only in the first chapter of the trial. The unsealed indictment was just the preview. The trial will be the movie, and it is going to be a horror story. Does Diddy have a defense? His lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, claims that Diddy is an innocent man who is being targeted for his lifestyle. He argues that all the sexual encounters were consensual. He argues that the freak-offs were just adults doing adult things. But he has a steep hill to climb. He has to explain the coercion. He has to explain the violence. He has to explain the video of Diddy beating Cassie in the hotel hallway, evidence that the public has already seen with their own eyes. That video, released by CNN, was the nail in the coffin for the court of public opinion. It showed, without a shadow of a doubt, the brutality that Cassie had described. It stripped away the he said, she said defense. It wasn't a rumor, it was on tape. And remember, the feds have more tapes. The Diddy we saw in music videos, dancing in shiny suits and preaching black excellence was a carefully constructed mask. The man described in the indictment is a predator who used his empire to trap his victims. The disconnect between those 2 images is what makes the story so hard to process. But the evidence is piling up. The witnesses are coming forward, and the doors of the Metropolitan Detention Center are locked tight. If you want to see the full breakdown of the other celebrities who might be implicated in the Combs enterprise, check out the playlist right here. We are tracking every flight log and every deleted tweet. Click here to see who is scrubbing their social media right now.